Good morning, Tigers. All right, so this week in social studies, we are going to be really focusing on declaring independence, our Declaration of Independence. Last week, we looked at some of the different battles happening in the Revolutionary War. We saw some victories on the Patriot side. We saw some victories for the British. We also looked at a really important pamphlet that a man named Thomas Paine wrote called Common Sense. And on last Friday, I believe it was, last Thursday and Friday, you kind of looked at a couple of things focused around that pamphlet of his. We'll look at that again today as we go through this. We're going to be today focusing on just taking in some information, looking at the text. I'm going to talk you through a few things. And then you're going to actually be coming back to this text this week to do some work. So the paragraph that you write this week is not going to be a journal prompt. Rather, it is going to come from this information that we look at in social studies. So we're talking about a 1-year period here, all right? And some important vocabulary words to know. We have the word independence, right? Independence just means you are free from being ruled by anyone else. And that's what the colonists wanted. They wanted to become independent, gain their independence from Britain. The second word you see there is declaration. Think about the word declaration. Think about our sentence studies. I miss those. Declarative sentences where you're declaring something. Well, a declaration is the same type of thing. You declare what you want, and they're going to declare their independence. That is that statement of independence that they are striving for as colonists. When we think about rights, rights are just freedoms that are protected by the law. United States citizens have rights right now, right? Your freedom of speech. Those are rights that we are given. And then the last word that we have there is the word treason. So I'm just reading these off the side here. Treason is, that is a crime where a person is found guilty of fighting against their own government. So if you commit treason, you're going against your own government. And we're going to come across an individual who committed great treason during the Revolutionary War time period. All right. One thing to think about is the Declaration of Independence is really kind of like having a birth certificate. When all of you were born, your parents filled out a birth certificate just stating and signing with your name, where you were born, what time you were born, giving all of that important information. So think of the Declaration of Independence as kind of like a birth certificate, because the signing date was the day that United States declared itself an independent country, no longer tied to Britain. All right. So we're going to kind of read through this. Like I said, talk a little bit. Today, your assignment is really just listening to this information. You're going to want to come back to it. It will be available to you all week, but this is important information to have. So starting off here, it says build on what you know. You may have a birth certificate at home. This paper tells you when you were born. In a way, our country has a birth certificate. It's called the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration marks the beginning of the United States. So we're going to first look at these steps to independence. And some of this is going to be information that you're going to be like, oh, we did this last week. You're right, we did. Just kind of a quick review. So common sense and debates in Congress changed people's minds about being ruled by Britain. After the battles of 1775, the American colonies and Britain were at war. However, not all colonists felt this was right. Many still thought of King George III as their ruler. They did not want a war with Britain. Other colonists were patriots. They wanted independence. Independence means freedom from being ruled by someone else. Some patriots felt that independence was worth fighting for. Patrick Henry, a patriot from Virginia, said in a thrilling speech to a group of Virginia delegates, "Give me liberty or give me death." Right? You heard that quote last week, and I think in one of the ed puzzles that I gave you as an assignment, I asked you, like, what does that mean? Give me liberty or give me death? And basically what Patrick Henry meant when he said that, he said, you know, he would rather die than remain a British subject. He would rather just end his life than to continue to be under the ruling of King George III and the British. Another patriot, Thomas Paine, use the written word to argue for independence. So down here we've got Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. And over here up at the top, we've got Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense. So let's take a look at what Common Sense was. It says, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense in January 1776. Common Sense pushed for independence. The pamphlet was brief, inexpensive, and easy to understand. Paine wrote that King George treated the colonies unfairly. He claimed that the only way to stop this was to become independent from Britain, right? Colonists bought over 100,000 copies of Common Sense within a few months. George Washington said, I find Common Sense is working a powerful change in the minds of many. Thomas Paine put into writing what many of the boldest patriots were already saying. He wrote that colonists had nothing to gain and much to lose by staying tied to an unjust king. So Thomas Paine, again, break free from Britain, right? And that's what he put in this pamphlet for them. What did he say was the only solution for this unfair treatment of Britain? Was that the colonies, they had to become independent. They had to become their own country. They could no longer be under the British rule, under King George III. So let's go ahead and look at debate in Congress. Delegates to the Second Continental Congress had read Common Sense. Many agreed that independence from Britain was necessary, but they also knew it was risky. Britain was a powerful country. King George III was already gathering soldiers to attack the colonies. Could the colonies stand up to Britain? Some delegates also worried that not enough colonists wanted independence. However, support for independence was growing all across the colonies. John Adams argued strongly for independence. More and more of the delegates agreed with his point of view. At last, on June 7th, 1776, a Virginia delegate named Richard Henry Lee asked Congress to officially declare independence, right? So that's kind of where we're at there. So if we go on, I'm just going to continue here. Let's look at this Declaration of Independence. So the Declaration of Independence explains why the colonies should be free. Why do we need this freedom? Congress asked Thomas Jefferson and 4 others to write a Declaration of Independence. A declaration is a statement that declares or announces an idea. Congress needed a document to declare why the colonies had to become independent of Britain. In the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson wrote what many Americans believed about their rights. Rights are freedoms that are protected by a government's laws. So Congress felt that this document was important, and Congress needed to tell colonists, Britain, and the world why this break from Britain was so vital, was necessary. And thinking about Thomas Jefferson, Jefferson argues that all people are born with rights that no one can take away. He wrote that people have the right to live, the right to be free, and the right to seek happiness. So if you look down here at this quote, this is a very famous quote from Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're going to go more into the wording of this probably next week, I believe it is. So Jefferson argued that a government should protect these rights. If it does not, then the people have the right to start a new government. The idea in the Declaration were not new. Jefferson used ideas that John Locke and other English thinkers had written about. Locke had said that government should serve their people. Jefferson listed many ways that Britain did not serve the colonists. For instance, King George had tried to take away rights. He had forced taxes on the colonists and sent soldiers to control them. He even sent soldiers that, you had to house them. You had to let them into your home. Jefferson showed that the colonists had many reasons to separate from the king. They had the right to create their own government. So this whole idea of the Declaration of Independence, they're declaring that need to break free of the rules, the control that the king and parliament had over the colonists. All right. It says down here, this is Mary Catherine Goddard, and Congress hired her to print an official copy of the Declaration. And over here, excuse me, we're going to look at parts of the Declaration. So you can read the full text of the Declaration in the back of our book. I can also link a website that would bring you right to it. But the Declaration begins by promising to explain why the colonies must break away from Britain, right? And that is in section 1. All right, that is explaining up here, this is why we got to break free. Then the next section down here explains that people have rights that you can't take away. It says that all men are created equal. It goes back to those lists of rights over here that all people have when you're born. You have the right to life. You have the right to be free. And those should not be taken away. Then we look down here, this number 3, this larger section, this longest section is a list of complaints against the king. So these are all the things that they have, complaining about King George III. And then down here, the last section argues that the colonies have to be free to protect the colonists' right. It declares that the colonies are independent. So they're declaring their independence. And then down here at the bottom of the document, delegates to Congress signed their names. John Hancock, President of Congress, signed his name in really large letters. You see that right here. And they've kind of pulled that out for you. He has the largest signature that we have. All right. And the last thing we're going to look at is the importance of our declaration. All right. So up there at the top, that picture, those are the signers of the Declaration. You got Thomas Jefferson, which he is right here. Okay, this is Thomas Jefferson. Sitting down over here, this is John Hancock. And then this back here, this is John Adams. And then right over here, we have Ben Franklin. And here they are in front of the Second Continental Congress, or the Continental Congress. So let's think about this importance of the Declaration. So really, the Declaration sets forth basic ideas of freedom and equality, all those things that as Americans we have, freedom and equality. So on July 4th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress voted to accept the Declaration. The delegates knew that signing the Declaration was dangerous. Britain would call it treason. Treason is the crime of fighting against one's own government. Anyone who signed the Declaration could be charged with treason and hanged. Yet, delegates signed it. So there was a big risk there. The signers knew when they signed that document that they could be put to death. But they signed it anyways because they really believed strongly that what they were doing was right. It was in the best interest of all the colonies. So they put that out there. The Declaration was read aloud to excited crowds across the new nation. People tore down pictures and statues of King George. They celebrated by ringing bells and firing cannons. The Declaration of Independence marked the moment when Americans chose to rule themselves, right? And they were now no longer relying on a king to lead them. They were on their own. They were independent. So thinking about equality then and now. The Declaration is important today because it states that the people of the United States believe in equal rights for all. Today we know that Jefferson's words, all men are created equal, include everyone, women as well as men, every race, every group, every ability. Is that what the words meant when the Declaration was written? Probably not. But in 1776, all Americans could not exercise the same rights. If we go back to those early times, remember, it was only white men who owned property could vote, right? We looked at that early on in class, how, there were a lot of people who, if they didn't meet certain criteria, they couldn't vote. Many believed that this was unfair. Abigail Adams, she wanted Congress to recognize the equal rights of women, and so she wrote to her husband, John Adams, in the new code of laws, remember the ladies. However, it took many years, but women, African Americans, American Indians, and other groups have gained equal rights. In later lessons, we'll read about these important laws that guarantee these rights. The Declaration has inspired people in the past and the present to continue to work for liberty and equal rights. So thinking about this lesson summary, essentially, colonies decided to declare their independence from Britain. Thomas Jefferson, he writes the Declaration of Independence, and that states that everyone has certain rights that no government can take away. So why does this matter? The ideas in the Declaration of Independence have meaning today. The rights of freedom and equality that Jefferson wrote about are important American values and principles. So I know that was a lot to kind of take in and listen, but I wanted you to hear everything in one sitting rather than try to break this all up. Now, we are going to come back to this. Tomorrow, I'm going to kind of give you a couple things to think about. We're going to start doing a little bit of work, and I'm going to ask you to be writing a paragraph that goes along with some of these things about declaring independence. On Friday, I've got a great parody that goes with the Declaration of Independence, a rather catchy tune, and it is not Mr. Betts. So stay tuned for that on Friday. But that kind of breaks down our Declaration of Independence, how that all came to be. So these readings are going to be used this week. So we will be coming back to them. So today's all you had to do, listen to me.